We can discuss that more later. Yeah, it will be very interesting. I think we need to give the floor to Ninna now.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm very happy to be here. And I have a presentation here that you will be, if Patricia could help me, she could send it to you. And I will basically follow it, but not really, so because I don't want to take too much time. And then also, I'm not really sure how much you have heard yesterday about the Swedish system. But as I am representing the civil society platform, I will present what are we doing, or how are we helping, and how are we working against trafficking. That's the focal I will have today. And then the Swedish platform civil society was formed 3 years ago during 2013 when Greta, monitoring the European Convention, when they were evaluating Sweden. They went here, and as I had sent them a report, they asked me to collect NGOs and that we should have a meeting. And then I discovered that some of those NGOs have never actually met each other, and some of them were very much, knowing each other. So out of this, then we took the initiative to form a platform because we thought that we could do so much more together. Okay? So in this platform and there's a loose network also, so to say. So we are opening up always to think about victim first and how by human right based we could do the most to help victims, but also to be there and really promote the civil society perspective and be the voice of the victims and the civil society. So in the network we have a lot of different organizations, and we could actually offer all kind of things, from identification. We could connect in the legal aid, the medical aid, for just clothes, food, shelters. Normally is part of the platform, and also we could help them with our connections in other countries to return safely. We could, really try when it works as best to be there and fill in the gaps. Okay, we don't want to be instead of the society, but we want to fill in the gaps. Because as we heard before, there are so much rules and, acts and legal things, but people are not following those. They are people, then they are vulnerable and they are exposed and they need, us to be fast sometimes. Okay. And also then we regularly have meetings because cooperation is the key to combat trafficking. So we have regular meetings. 2 weeks ago we had a platform meeting on children at risk. And then we invite the NGOs and we invite the cooperating partners. That's the national rapporteur, and she was there. And the national coordinator, she was there. The migration board, they were there. Yeah, and the police, the national rapporteur in Sweden is placed at the police, but we also invite the police that works in their special units. The Baltic Sea States Council that have a task force against trafficking, they were there on this meeting. And then we had some presentations, from the people that really work and meet unaccompanied children that have been denied asylum, and they were talking about how exploited they are. Okay, and then we also have about the children to the victims that you talked about, and then we were informally discussing. And in 2 weeks we will have another meeting, on another topic, and before we had on return and vulnerable asylum seekers and so on. So this is an informal way to make people cooperate. But we also have a more formal way. So, and then I collect data. I ask all of the NGOs to fill in a form to have databases from the civil society. And I send it yearly to the national rapporteur. So now suddenly the voices of the people that have not reported to the police are also included in the national report, yearly report. And that didn't happen before. Okay, and so this is just how we are working. And so together we could, as I said, provide a lot for the victims. And then I guess you have heard a little bit about the National Referral Mechanism, the official one in Sweden. We took part in it. And we tried to, together with authorities, make a very, very practical manual. Okay? And this national referral mechanism will guide especially authorities, but will also be something that we could point of. And this is, it says who should do what and when. Okay? And that's a really good thing. But the problem with this is it only works if you first report to the police, because that's the entry. So we have a high threshold here in Sweden. You have to report to the police to get the society's recognition as a victim of trafficking. You could, as a person in need, in despair, get some support, as you mentioned, but that's just as you are a person in despair. But as a victim for trafficking, you have to report to the police. And it's in Sweden, as I guess you've heard, it's only the investigating police that could apply from the migration authorities for 30 days of what they call reflection, okay? But this is not equivalent with what the European Convention says, okay? So we have a little trick. We have done something here, the civil society. Yeah, because we have now, instead of the national referral mechanism, that we have, and there is a connection there on the official side. It's a return program, and to fill in the gaps, together with a national coordinator, supported by the national coordinator, who runs this complementary support program that lower the threshold in entry. Okay, so then it is was having a possibility to finance 30 days of reflection with no report to the police. Okay? So it's a de facto reflection period, but it's informal. And I will go into that more in details very soon. Just an appetizer for best practice, yeah? So, am I talking too fast, or is it okay? Okay, then we go on. Yeah, there are so many people that need a helping hand, okay? And there are many more than the system really recognizes. So our base is the human right approach, that we really like to have all victims. Doesn't matter if the perpetrator is in the same country or not. This is a victim that we identify and we should help. And I think, sometimes when you're working with this, I think if you are identifying a victim, the least we could do is try to keep track that she or he is not re-trafficked. Because if they're re-trafficked, we get another victim. One victim and then we get two victims. If we want to talk prevention, stop re-trafficking. Such a good way to stop trafficking and to act preventive. We're always looking for new emerging trends and new risk groups. That's good. But if you have her and him there, then at least we should be possible for us to help her and him the best way possible to not be re-trafficked. I think that's a goal we could have. So our dream is the full-scale implementation of all articles. We are working on that. And as I said before, Greta is monitoring Sweden. And here you could say we have 40 countries that have ratified. And this is the urges that the Greta said to Sweden, that we should really do something about. And as you see in the slashes, that's 40. So sometimes you could see we 34 or 40, 33 or 40, okay. There's a lot of countries that are really struggling with the reflection period and with the support and the child victims. That's the problem for many countries. And then here in Sweden we have some problem with the action plans and so on also. But this is a nice slide I like to send to you. But then this is really what we also have like a tool when we as a platform are working to strengthen the right for the victims and the support to the victims, then we could point here. So it's very useful and say that if you don't want Greta to say the same thing in the second evaluation, we could help you. And I could also say, this is hard to do this. It's hard to solve all those problems, but we could help you, okay? So it's an offer you can't refuse, I hope. And then I said, as we have this data collection, okay? And then we could see that there is another picture actually than the official one, okay? When officially the police or anyone on the migration board, for example, they have been really good at that lately, identify someone that they think are a potential victim, and there is a report to the police, and they go into the system. They are often or almost always anyway placed at the NGOs and the civil society's shelters, okay? So half of the persons that we do help are sent to us or you know, from the authorities when they have found. And it is women we help in the shelters, because that's the kind of shelters we do have, okay? We don't have any really, you know, shelters that are developed only for men or so, but there are shelters for children. And then we could, of course, try to help in another way to find protections and somewhere to stay for a man. But mostly we have identified and are helping women. So, and half of the victims then have never reported to the police and have never been recognized by any authority. Although they may have a lot of authorities' contacts, but they have not. The first point of contact for help seeking is the NGOs. And it could be a volunteer that are handing out soup and clothes that are the first contact, or when you're walking in the street or someone is calling, you know, it could be many ways we get this contact. But half of them are directly and only contacting the civil society. And out of those people, and I have looked at for 100 women we have helped, okay? A little more than half of those women have only come to us. And then there are almost always from third countries. Many of them are asylum seeking, many of them undocumented, okay? There are also a lot of problem with unrelated backgrounds. They have been rejected from their family. They have had a boyfriend and they were sold to you know, there's a lot of problems in the background, gender related often. And that's why they don't want to report to the police. And then often we do find that the main thing for those women have been thinking about the children, okay? So we always, when we are collecting data, we are always asking, do you have children? And where are the children? And if you have a woman that have her child back in the home country, it's often, as you probably know, that why she's there, why she went away, it was to support the child. Or the child has a threat on her, or they have a threat on the child. And then, of course, the woman would like to cooperate. And that's why she is so absolutely devastated, afraid, when she is identified, that someone will tell her back home, because then it will be a problem for the child. Okay? And unfortunately, we do actually have a case with a woman from Nigeria, and she was participating in reporting to the police, and she gave her testimony. And it was the last part in a very complex case with their mother, brother was in Belgium. And then could you really have a conviction and so on, and they were very excited and thought that this was a good example. But it was not, because this woman had a boy home in Nigeria that was killed as vendetta. So when they say, the women, that they are afraid and that they don't want to cooperate because there is threat against the children in the home countries, it is really true. So we have also always to know that, okay? And then, as you have told now here, we are also all those children that have been exposed to the trauma and that are with the women, okay? So we are always granting finance to the woman and their child. They are not recognized as victims today. But if you look at the first article in the European Council Convention, it stands that all victims and witnesses should have protection and support. So I think we could fight to that will include that you should always finance the support and have tools and a good assistance plan to help the child that have been to the victims. And so this is having children make you women very vulnerable. So that's one of our main findings. And you could have cases, but if you have statistic and data, and then you could add stories, this is really doing something. Because 2 years ago, our Swedish government, when they were writing to the national coordinator what they should do the next coming year, they for the first time included also to look specific at the victims' children. And this was actually due to that we have really raised the voices and let them know about this problem. Okay, this is just a thing on the paper. We have a long way to go, but it's the first step. Okay. Now to the National Support Program that is filling in the gaps. So it is. We began like that there was from the government to the national coordinator a demand that they should look to a support program. And as we have a discussion, they say that the service providers, they are the civil society, so they should run the support program. And then we were developing this like this, that it's very important with quality. So the first thing that we did was to see that some of our service providers, 7, were certificated. So we set a minimum standards. This is what you should be able to provide when it comes to education, safety, awareness, everything, and in the line with the human right-based documents and so on. And then we had visited to all the shelters, and if they didn't live up to the quality standards we set, we said we could help you with this and this. And this is really important because then the society, if they place a girl, as it is a woman in our shelters, they know what to expect. There's a quality mark. And it's really important also that we have a certain standard. And then we said that we would like to facilitate the entry, because that we saw that this is the main problem. Because as I told you before, more than half of the victims that we help are never reporting to the police. And then we never get any finance for them. Okay, that goes without saying. So this is a way that we could finance at least the first 30 days. And it's a kind of informal identification. So you have to fill in a certain initial needs assessment standards. The certificate actors, the service providers, that they are the only one. And then they send it to the program manager, that's me. And then I look at the indicators and I say, yeah, this is a victim. Okay. Doesn't she report to the police? Isn't she entitled to society support? We could grant as long as our funding lasts, up to 30 days. And then we will also have, if she has a children, some money for that. And then after 30 days, if she's still not reporting to the police, it could be because she's afraid of you could have several reasons. Then we could now, it's new for this year, also grant her 90 days of assistance. Because we discovered last year that after 30 days, some of them didn't report to the police anyway. So then we had to pay for them ourselves, and that we would like to make this visible, because that's a part of the support program also, to say that all this we have to do because the society aren't there for them, okay? And so this is the way how it works. And then also after 30 days or immediately after identification, if they report to the police, there are sometimes still things that the society do not provide them with. You know, it could be kind of when are coming to the legal assistance. And we had one case, for example, that was a girl that had a tattoo that she had been forced to, she had been forcibly tattooed with remarks of the owner in the brothel that she had been forced to work. And then for getting her human dignity back, it was very important to remove or to replace or anyway, like, not having that physically mark on her. And that's beyond what the societies really have planned for. So this is the kind of thing we then said that we could finance. And then if they are entering the return program that the Swedish society do have you heard about it? They're cooperating with IOM, yeah. It's really good, but not all do like to cooperate, you know, with the authorities as much as that is needed even for this one. So then, if they would like to stay in Sweden, then we could add a little bit of integration support, because there is just not, she may, or he of course, have more need as a former victim of trafficking, some more support, you know, from the shelter than just this what society could provide. Yeah, and it's about having the faith, you know, and knowing how to do and deal, and you know, it could be Swedish lessons also, and things like that. And then sometimes we have had those kind of cases when they don't want to, they are forcibly more or less having to return, or they return to the home countries. And then we could do very quickly try to help them to be that someone from a screened NGO is meeting up at the airport or something like that, and having further contacts with them. So we don't, if we know about someone getting sent home, we don't want them to be just sent home. We would really like try to hinder re-trafficking. And in practice, when it comes to those cases, then it could be like this, that the migration board, for example, on their on the refugee centers, they say that this woman, she's probably exposed to trafficking. So then they call me. And then I will have a cases there from, and then we could pay for the train ticket. And then she was sent to a shelter. And then she could have 30 days of reflection. So we have this cooperation, although it's not officially okay, the migration board, and as we have this dialogue, they are human beings and they know about it and they would like to solve it. And also the police say, it's much better if you have them for 30 days and then report to the police, because then they are maybe cooperating and giving us the information we need. Yeah. So in the long run, we hope that this could be a way to really lobby strongly for a true reflection period. Or otherwise, just keep on doing this, going from the national coordinator to the support program to the victims, you know. It's just another way to do it. So the result of this program then is that we could give help also delinked from cooperation with law enforcement. And that's mostly what we really have to fill, those gaps that we have to fill in. And that the children are giving help. And that we have a higher quality. And that we are cooperating very well together, because the program keeps us together when it comes to the focal thing, giving support. And as we hope, some more cases that really in the end do report to the police, because of course we like to have those perpetrators convicted too. And we have some challenges then, and that is in Sweden we are so good in identifying and giving help to women exposed to sexual exploitation, but we would like to be better also to not only identify but really offer some help to men. We have a lot of them exploited in the berry picking business, for example, and we are afraid that the exploitation for forced labor and such things would increase in the future very much. And this is of course connected to the migration routes. Yeah. We have so many men, because the 70% of the asylum-seeking people that are coming here are men, because it's so hard for a woman to come here, you know. Yeah. And then they are applying for asylum, and if they are not granted, then they often become undocumented, and then of course there's a risk for them to be exploited. And we have also seen in Sweden last year we had 35,000 unaccompanied children. You know that? And most of them were Afghanistani boys, and they were escaping forced military service in many cases. They have often been exposed for a lot of sexual exploitation on their way. When they arrived to Sweden, there was a high risk for them to disappear on the way to the centers. And in the centers, there were indicators that they were used and exploited, with suddenly appear with fancy clothes, you know, and had money to buy drugs. But the people running the shelters for unaccompanied children have not really the eyes for trafficking, you know, so you have to try to cooperate with them. And as an NGO, we can do nothing about children. We can only help the victims' children. We are not, it's always the society when it is a child. But then we have, of course, done, now the Swedish government have an agreement with the Afghanistani government that if Afghanistani boy or man or anyone is not granted asylum, they are forcibly by police taken, grabbed, and going to Kabul and Afghanistan. Okay, and they're so afraid. It has been such a high rise in suicide and unhealth among those large groups of Afghanistani boys, and many of them try to live, you know, just without getting discovered. And we have heard, because we have meeting places for them, that they say that they have to spend the night, you know, with him. And not that they wanted to, but they have to, you know, provide sexual services or other things to have somewhere to sleep. And then there are unaccompanied minors. Yeah, so they're vulnerable, and there are many of them. There are many of them, several thousands. So we think this is something that a risk we see in the future. We think cooperation is the key. So we should just go from hinders to solutions. Yeah, but it's good to see how could we cooperate in the best way? What's the most less hindering way to cooperate? Try to just do what's best for the victim. That's what we should do. And I think also it's very wise to follow up work. There's so many good seminars like this one and other ones, and we should, you know, build on it. Just not doing it once more, no more. We have to build on it and exchange. And I think it's so important to keep the human right approach. And then, before I end, I could just add that we always talk so much about it's a attack against the human dignity, and it is driven by profit. Yes, it is driven by profit. But you should also remember that before you exploit someone, you dehumanize them. You take them out of their human dignity by saying that they are not worth more. They belong to this group. They are poor. They should be happy. You know, you do something mentally to be able to exploit them. And sometimes that's the key. That's really what they like to do when they are kidnapping people, boys, and then forcing them to be soldiers and then raid their own village. They would like really to violate the human dignity then. So this is sometimes, it's really a human right approach that is what's keeping the things together, I think. So, and then if you have any further questions afterwards, when you get this, you could contact me by mail also. Excuse me?
The referral mechanism, do you have it also in an English version?
Yes, we do. The Swedish official one, yes. Yeah. There is.
I was interested to read a little bit on it, on the further activities in the project, because I would like to know, and this is a short question for you, if based on each type of assistance, you have in this referral mechanism more in-depth information on who is doing the referral for legal or health or social,
it's very, very.
tools.
Yeah.
So it's like focused on each type of assistance, or it contains like general guidelines when it comes
It's
to
not general guidelines, it's very practical.
Okay.
It's like a handbook.
Okay.
If this is what, if they are identified, you should look for this and this, check this and this and this. Who's responsible? This and this and this person. Watch out, you better think, look at that part. If you would like to go home immediately, go to that page. So it's really hands-on. And we thought that that would be a good thing. Mm-hmm.
And I have a question on the legal aspect. I would like to know, in the case of compensation, because you mentioned it, what the lawyer can do if we consider that the compensation is too low? How you will contest here a decision through which is provided compensation to a lower level comparing with the damages that the victim suffered?
You can complain to the court about it.
Okay.
Yes.
And how the court in general assess the psychological damages?
Yes, as I
Because
said,
this is problematic also in Romania.
it is. It needs to be proved.
Okay.
So it depends many times on what certificates you get from the doctors and psychotherapists
Can
and
be
so on.
any psychotherapist, or is like more on special institutions
Yes,
recognized?
the more recognized, the better. And so I think that is something. And as I said, 82,000 for that case yesterday was the compensation. And then both of the perpetrators from Romania, both the man and the woman, pay that together to the victim for all these damages.
And if the assets are on the names of other family members, let's say the trafficker has nothing on his name, what we can do about that?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. In the Swedish system, did you understand it?
No, what was the question?
If the assets, if the trafficker is,
nothing.
has nothing, in the Swedish system, then you would, it's a special system to do that, but when the traffickers are actually originating from another country, we need to check that up, because they were deported back to Romania, and then they had to pay. So I believe there's a cooperation then with the authorities, but it could be very interesting to check that out. I can ask the prosecutors.
That's really interesting,
That's a
because
good
in
question.
general
You
it's
write
very
that down.
difficult to prove that.
Yes.
I was thinking again about the referral mechanism. Does it have the binding force of a law? Because what they did in Bulgaria, we also have a national referral mechanism. They put it through the Council of Ministers, which like approved it. So it gathered the status like a secondary legislation, because whenever we have that like institutional problem in Bulgaria, because whenever authorities see something that is not written in the law, they say, if it's not in the law, why should I do that?
Yeah.
So does it have the force of a law?
No, it doesn't. And then in Sweden we do have 290 municipalities that are self-governed. Yeah, and the national referral mechanism is a manual, as I said. It's a guidelines, okay? But then how should we see that it is implemented? That's the big, yeah. Then I said the national coordinator now have appointed regional coordinators, national coordinators, regional coordinators, and then they have educations, okay? So I have been taking part in several educationals with them, and then they are we are going to Kalmar or Växjö, you were there too, Linköping, yeah. And then they are inviting people from the municipality, and they come from the school, from social services, they come from from the health care sector together to listen and learn about human trafficking and about natural referral mechanism and about our national support program. And this is kind of new, and this is the way it is supposed to be implemented. Then we of course have the question about following it up, yeah, because they come there, they learn, and they get to know about it. But then you should really make it works.
I just wanted to ask the financial support of your
The platform. Yeah, we don't. We are not. We. It's some kind of added value, and I'm independent. I'm affiliated to the Södertörn University. Yeah, and then of course for the program, the administrative program, and to finance the support in the program, we have support from the national coordinator. But otherwise, it is a kind of added value. Mhm. Then we are now forming a more formal organization, and this our intention, and that would be make it possible for us to apply for founding. But then I could also say that we are part of the EU civil society platform. So I have been there from the start. So we meet, from several countries many times. And then also I took part in the workshop OSSE had about updating their national förmechanism handbook. Okay. So when then
Do you have statistics on how many identified victims of human trafficking you have each year? Because in Belgium we had in 2015, I said already yesterday, 150 victims, identified victims of human trafficking in our special statute for victims of human trafficking. And each one of them receive afterwards also a permanent stay permit. So that's very relevant in the perception of human rights. And what we also have is a specialized statute for smuggling victims under aggravating circumstances. What that means, it's important that there is a criminal proceeding for human smuggling, but when a victim of smuggling has been raped or there has been violence on the way, then she can get, when the prosecutor agree, also a stay permit as victim, or a victim of smuggling.
Can I just ask a follow-up question there? You said that all the identified victims had a residence permit. That means that they were asylum seekers, refugees, no?
No, we have an apart.
Yeah, yes, but then it was a criminal proceedings then? Yes, but the crime was committed in Belgium,
Yeah.
exactly. Yes,
in
that was what I meant before, that then it's exactly the same system as in Sweden. So then it was very interesting to hear from Spain that your system is actually working in another way.
In theory.
In theory,
Working in another
exactly.
way.
But still, it's interesting to see how it is in theory then, if we can learn something from it. Yes.
But how many identified victims do you have per year?
Actually, it's very, very hard to say. We have very poor data in Sweden, actually, because we have parallels. We have data. You could look at the national rapporteur's yearly annual report, and then you could see that there is a certain amount of report to the police. That's one thing. And then you could have, in the first instance, you could have a conviction that could be, maybe then if it's really finally a conviction in that last case, it could take several years. And then we of course have the data that we are collecting as NGO. But that also, sometimes in the data we have someone that we have reached out, we said this is a victim, but we don't really, then she disappear. Yeah, and then we don't, it's nothing more, but we just see her and then we just fill in the data what we can, because make her at least visible. Yeah, and then sometimes they are staying for several years. Yeah, so this is very hard, but it's not only hard, I think, for us. It's the statistic is a problem, and
as we said yesterday, we had 172 reports of human trafficking in the last report, and out of these 172, there were only 2 convictions, and most of these cases then are reported first as human trafficking. But then it turns out it was procuring.
Yeah.
And as the police officer that was here yesterday told us about, that when he is out on the streets working to find these victims, he is always looking for proof for procuring or human trafficking. Even if it's just purchasing sexual services, that was a crime that was reported. So many of these cases end up as smuggling, human smuggling, or as procuring when it's sexual exploitation, or other forms of exploitation. As I said, in Sweden, the threshold for being convicted for a crime of human trafficking is the highest, I believe, in Europe right now.
And
We're being
then
criticized
yeah.
for having too much evidence
And
that is needed.
now it's, I mean, now we just, 23rd of the February, we had sent in this remissvar. We have a committee that have been working on how to rewrite the legislation when it comes to human trafficking, and they have suggested 2 new crimes that would be equal, like procurative for sexual exploitation, but to use someone economically for labor or for other kind of exploitation. And it has just been out for, you should also have a say, and we sent in a 13 long page say, and we think it's a good thing to have those crimes, because if you can't prove human trafficking, you could at least do something, because otherwise the gray zone from bad working condition to human trafficking, it's such extremely big.
In the end, apart from how many identified by NGOs or by police, how many really obtained a status of victim of DHB per year?
You mean in the criminal proceedings?
Yes.
Well, as I said, no, those were the ones that were convicted. And the police reports were 172, and almost always when there are police reports, then they have the status, but then it could change.
And what happens
Last-
afterwards then? They have a status and then...
Well, you still get the support as a victim of crime. You always get a support in Sweden as a victim of crime.
Okay.
And then it depends on what type of victim, what type of crime are you a victim of.
Yeah.
If you are a victim of human trafficking, then you are sent to a shelter if you need that.
Yeah.
Or you are through the NGOs, through the civil society platform, you have the other needs fulfilled. But if it's a criminal proceedings and they find out it's procuring, well, they may still need a shelter house or still need support, so they will have that until they don't need it anymore.
They don't need it anymore, but what if the criminal proceedings are finished?
Yeah,
There
that's-
has been a conviction, or there has not been a conviction. What happens to the victims?
Then that's a problem after the final conviction also, because they may have compensation. Yeah. But they are not, I mean, that's a problem in Sweden, I think, that you are not recognized with the full needs that you are supposed to have when you are traumatized and exposed for trafficking. It should be, they are using the same laws that are applied for other crimes, and then, but this is something other. This is a human right.
So many times
Crime.
it's much up to the NGOs there to fill in those gaps. Like the exit program that we run with a little angel in the red light district, she meets many of these girls every week. Many of them don't report to the police. And in this, for example, this exit program, or in the exit program that the shelters run, when the society is doing what they can, but then they say, now you're on your own, then the NGOs are out there to fill in those gaps.
Actually, they become illegal. They don't have a residence permit, but they can still have support from these NGOs, but they don't have really
No, they have no status. No, and then Greta said that we should have the status to be able to be the first point of notification, NGOs. But we are waiting for it. But now we have done it anyway. But in another and then also I would say that the migration board, they have also been fantastic when it comes nowadays to search for trafficking. They have new coordinators 2 years ago, and they have educated, and then they educate the educators. Yeah, and I have also been on those kind of education. And then they have now, from saying that we never ever encounter anyone exposed to trafficking, now they have just last autumn 300 cases, and they expect many, many more. But all of those are not reporting to the police. Okay, so it is complicated. But I would anyway stress. I like to stress that there is a Swedish model in that we are cooperating so well, authority and civil society. And I think there are so many people that we are all sitting on different functions and roles and mandates, but there are so many people that really like or want to do something about it. So the climate, the possibilities in that way, I mean, after all, to let us do this program, it is a good thing. Yeah, so we have to say that this is a thing that I think is not maybe possible in all countries. Mm-hmm.
And as I said before, we actually asked, of course, all the authorities that we work with. The police authority it was possible for them to come, and we also have asked other authorities, and sometimes they're just too busy, But it's like you say, I think it's pretty unique that we have this program, that all the NGOs have a platform, and that the migration authorities, that the police authorities, all the different authorities work so closely together. And sometimes, of course, like you said, you criticize that the Swedish rapporteur is within a police authority, and that could be a point that it should be a person outside of the authorities. But when it is like this, I think it's very important that there's a cooperation, because cooperation is the key, of course, to make a change. And like we said, when we see policy things that we would like to change, like in this case I told you about, we brought it to the European Court of Human Rights, saying that we need to point out here that here we need more support. Here we need to actually have individual guarantees from that country before we can send them there. So there are ways to cope with this, but in all these...
And then in that case we were cooperating also,
Exactly.
because we were supporting her living at Nomi,
Exactly.
and then I was also writing
An expert brief.
yeah.
Exactly.
So we are trying. I will say 2020. We would like to have trafficking for human beings as an asylum ground. Yeah,
exactly.
do it from different all our angles, and we could
Exactly.
make it.
Yeah. So cooperation is the key here. Yeah.
Yeah, I would just have a question too.
Yeah.
You're talking about all the collaborating units in this regard. Are you close to those who are working with terrorism, violence-related terrorism? We have a new coordinator in Sweden. Her name is Anna Karlstedt, and she works for the Swedish government. But you can imagine that the distance between this terrorism, violent terrorism, and trafficking is not too
No, we
far.
have seen that also, that there are, we have this kind of emerging trend, that we say they recruited to IS, recruitment, and we also in Sweden have this, we have loved to have coordinators and ombudsman, we have a special coordinator for EU migrants, and now we are also, we have been working a bit with him, and I would like also to with the terrorism, a coordinator, but if you,
I think there's something to do with that, because if you have, if you cannot see anything between these different aspects of different organizations, talking about trafficking, talking about terrorism, I can tell you something which are in between is the addictive drugs. They are everywhere. This is from my perspective.
But sometimes also, as I said, we were talking about EU migrants, so that or EU migrants, we could all be EU migrants. When we say that word in Sweden, we often refer to Roma people from Bulgaria and Romania that comes to Sweden, and then they are begging on the streets. And then we have been searching and exploring if sometimes it is forced begging, and this is something really kind of delicate, because the Roma group in Sweden, that's our minority, they have worked so hard to obtain the rights that they do have, and they are getting really not pleased being connected with organized forced begging. Yeah? And also it's a kind of, because the Roma group has tied together and survived so much because they have kept their family together. So that has been a survival mechanism. So if we are attacking, so to say, that kind of organization and saying it's forced begging, it's really, really not easy subject to bring up. Mm-hmm. So, but we have, I was in Gothenburg this autumn, and it was a very big conference with other people that I normally see, and they were working to support the Roma people group, especially, but poor people. And then it was a resistance really to talk about trafficking. Mm-hmm. So so we have so that's, I mean, it's kind of interesting, so to say, but of course we shouldn't see trafficking everywhere. But if people are exposed to it and used to abused, we are there to help them anyway.
Okay, thank you very much, Ninna. I think there are several more questions to ask Ninna, but we can take the opportunity during the coffee break.